Hey everybody, welcome back to the Daily Fan Racing YouTube channel. I'm your host GordoGambles, and today we are talking about some more racing. I am back in the flesh, and this time here to talk about a race at Phoenix this week. I am joined as always by my good-looking co-hosts here in Larkin and Jason from DFS NASCAR. Oh my God, you just got up close and personal. We know that Ryan is working through a nice little root canal, and he is here to grace us with his presence. Jason, happy as always, ready to break down another slate and talk about some more races we have this weekend. It is a fun slate, one I'm looking forward to, and excited to hear your points of view. As I say every single week, I'm learning as the week goes on, and you know what? It fills my Sunday, and I'm happy to be here talking about it with you guys. It has been fun so far, but let's talk about last week. How was it for you guys? What were your original thoughts on it? And we'll start with you, Ryan. How was last week for you as a whole?
Sucked. I dropped the ball in a couple of spots, so that never makes me feel too good. Had some good lineups in the mini backs for Xfinity, just nothing clicked. I was a little bit heavier on Cole Custer than I needed to be, and then the Cup race, I bought into Joey Logano and got beat. So wasn't fun on that aspect. From a site perspective, I guess this is a common theme. It seems like my worst two races have been the best two for our subs. So maybe it's some sort of like I had to pay the price for them, but we had a F1 takedown and a pretty big NASCAR one as well. So I'll take losing a little bit of money on my end to see those type of results.
Sounds good. And Jason, what about yourself?
Man, it was not a great weekend for me either. Like I spent a lot of time and wrote a 2,500 word article about all the variants in mile and a half tracks we saw last year. You guys saw the show last week. I put up all the graphs, all the charts, talked about all the different dominators, all different point leaders, about don't get wrapped up on practice speeds. And then what the hell happens? We have the two fastest cars in practice go out and just flat dominate this race. So not the way I built my lineups, not the way I anticipated. I had zero Willie Byron. That sucks. He crushes me every time. Like I can never get William Byron right. Like if I play him in that spot, he like fades. He doesn't lead a lap, rides fifth the stage one, fades, and just finishes like ninth or 10th. And just like that's how he always plays. Always runs when he in those spots when I play him. So that's kind of frustrating. Thankfully, I dodged Logano. I dodged Kyle Busch. I did have Larson in my cash lineup, so managed to salvage a profit this weekend out of that. So I hate having to salvage profits with cash games. It's not fun, but whatever. I mean, we'll take it.
There you go. Well, personally, for me as someone who I'm going to say it again, I say the same things over and over again. What's wrong with me? But as someone newer to watching it, I saw someone dominate the entire race. Is that something that happens typically? Is that something that you guys find entertaining or good for you? Or what are your own personal thoughts on that race? Not from your own betting perspective, but from a viewer perspective. How did you think it went last week?
I thought it was boring. I don't like seeing. I mean, it seemed like it was just Byron just had the best car and just got out and just flat out dominated. He won the race off pit road, and there was no really battle to start stage two, and just the first two stages kind of sucked. We got saved with a late race restart, but I thought it was kind of a boring race and kind of, I mean, it was like an old mile and a half race, right? It felt like what it was 5 years ago in a mile and a half. I felt like.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't enjoyable. I feel like the weather played a lot into that. It definitely set it up for that. Not every race is going to be good. I feel like sometimes we get hung up on, oh man, we had a bad race, so everything sucks. It's like, okay, sometimes races just aren't going to be good. Sometimes they're going to be great. Just how it plays out. NASCAR fans right now are just on the knife's edge to give a race either huge praise or say it sucked shit, and it's crazy. But the race, the issue is the cold temperatures, the high grip, everything set up for almost wide open action, and everyone's running the same lap times. It's incredibly hard to pass, and it made the cars even more aero dependent than they've been since this car existed. So unfortunately, the race was difficult. I think you saw with the Bubba Wallace Christopher Bell battle where they're just side by side for lap after lap, and neither one of them could break free of each other. That it was just too difficult to pass. It was too much of a tough situation for any driver to really overcome, and that always sets it up for kind of a bad show overall.
All right. Okay. Again, still figuring out how it was going, but it did seem pretty simple, and let's hope it's a bit different here. But again, there are races. The same thing I talk about fights. As long as we have fights, I can't complain. As long as we have races, I can't complain. Something to do. And as Matthew was saying, every race is good if you are playing DraftKings. Well, especially if you're winning it as well. I got another question there, and I think let's build toward that question, Matthew. I see that question there, and we're going to talk about it. But let's talk about this race as a whole. We are here in Phoenix. We have a race to break down. Preview it for me, Jason. We'll start with you. How do you see this thing going down?
Yeah, we're heading to Phoenix International Raceway, going old school there. But yeah, Phoenix is a short flat track, off more comparable if you're looking at tracks to compare it to on the circuit. I like New Hampshire, I like Gateway, like Richmond, Nashville, even, those short flat tracks. I think you can kind of group into one. There's about 7 races I think you look at. You can maybe group in Martinsville if you're looking at, but Martinsville's kind of just shaped differently and kind of runs a little bit differently. But as far as just it's going to run basically like what we see in short flat tracks. I mean, what we saw last year was track position is king, and track position is generally king at Phoenix. I mean, the guys who start up front are the guys who's going to have that advantage to lead the laps, going to be finishing up there, and the guys who can hold that track position is going to mean a lot to that finishing position this week.
Ryan, do you tend to agree? Is this one where you think it's going to be the people starting in front are going to stay in front, or how do you personally see this one?
Yeah, for sure. So Phoenix is it's a mechanical grip track. It's definitely about how you set up your car. If you can get it to rotate really well, then you're going to qualify good, and that qualifying usually always translates to the race. Seldomly do we see a guy qualify really poorly and drive their way to the front. This new car maybe makes that a little bit more likely that happens. I think Ross obviously started at the back and drove to the front in the playoff race last year, or the championship race last year. But for the most part, if you got your car turning, you have a good quality car, you're going to put a good qualifying lap down, and then you're going to qualify or race good in the race as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a race where you pinpoint the top 10 drivers as the best quote unquote plays, or the guys that you would expect to finish at the front as well. And it's a lot harder for those drivers starting deeper in the field to work out and pay off and end up being the better plays. It's typically your top 10 guys are finishing top 10. Your guy starting 20th on back are finishing roughly in that range. You'll have 1 or 2 outliers, but for the most part, they're going to kind of hang around where they qualify.
All right. Again, I see this question here from Matthew, and it's something I have seen around a little bit of news about. There are some new rules packages for this race. Ryan, we're going to throw it to you. Can you explain that to me? And can you answer the question for Matthew? Does previous data matter at all for it?
So I believe it does. So if you look back at pretty much every Phoenix race, no matter which of the last 12 cars they've run there, it's all pretty much the same. It doesn't, and you can cross over the Xfinity even with that series. The best cars run at the front, period. There's no out driving your competition here, if that makes sense. Like, you can't make a huge difference as a driver. All drivers can make a difference, but when you got 20 elite drivers, like Kyle Busch isn't outrunning Kevin Harvick because with a worse car, right? That type of thing. It's pretty much whoever has the best car is going to run top 5, and that's the case. And I think that kind of holds true no matter which type of setup or cars or situation we've seen at this track, in particular this track. The new rules for the short track races and road courses is essentially they're taking downforce away. They're trying to make these cars harder to drive. That way there's hopefully a little bit more off throttle time. They're not as stuck, and hopefully there's more passing, because there was no passing on the short tracks last year. So the hope is, I think it's a 30%. There's 30% less downforce on the cars now, mainly through the rear spoiler being cut in half. And then there's part of the ground effect tools, the fins or whatever the hell you want to call them underneath, are taken away. So it's taking less. Basically, all the downforce is made at the bottom of the cars underneath now through ground effect to an extent. And they're limiting that as well. So hopefully there's a little bit better racing. I don't know. I don't have high hopes for it to change a lot. And I still expect any car that's good to just flat out be good, if that makes sense.
Is that something you agree with, Jason, or what are your thoughts on this whole new rule set?
Yeah, it's hard to really say like exactly what's going to happen until we see these cars on practice. But I think the common around the industry is pretty much doesn't think it's going to be that large of an impact, because these cars already had a ton of downforce before they made this change. This is kind of like a mid-season change. It's not what they've just kind of removing some parts. It's not ideal. It's kind of like best they can do right now. We still have the large tires. I mean, Brian Murphy was on the Wednesday night pod show on Twitter that Derek Yoder does, and he was talking that he doesn't expect it to be much of a change for the exact same reasons. Like, it's really hard to tell, and I think the guys who were good at Phoenix the last 5 years are still going to be good at Phoenix. I think it's kind of a moot point at this point. So,
and I think to kind of piggyback on what I was saying a minute ago, so much of this car has been because everyone has the same pieces, right? They get the same stuff from the same places and they put it together. And the majority of the speed that they make is through setup. It's the mechanical grip side of things. So, I think that there's some aspects to what we saw last year that are just flat out going to carry over. Yes, the cars may be a little bit harder to handle. So, maybe your more talented drivers can shine a little bit, but overall, I'm thinking that the setup side of things just translates really well from last fall. I don't think it really matters, and any car that can rotate the center of the corner is going to have an advantage on the rest of the field. So I'm pretty much not really worried about the changes in terms of looking at past data. I think I'm pretty much honing in on what we've seen in the past year.
Okay, well, with that out of the way, I'm ready. Let's jump into some lineup construction. Let's talk about how we are personally, well, I say how we are really looking at targeting lineup construction. Are we looking to play some dominators here? Looking to play any place differential, finishing position? How are you personally constructing your lineups? Jason, we'll start with you. How are you doing it yourself?
Well, I mean, this race is really going to be all about those dominator points. You're going to have to hit those big dominator plays, and it's really going to be about finish position. We're not really going to focus much on position differential in this race. I know I have a graph if you want to pull it up for them, Gordo, and we can kind of walk through. And this kind of shows a really good job at, if you look at the last 8 races at Phoenix, this shows what the top 10 scores on DraftKings look like, and what the percentage of those scores make up. And you can see that positions 1 through 4 make up 34% of those top 10 scores on DraftKings of those last 8 races. I mean, that's a huge portion of the scores made up by the small percentage of guys. Those guys starting at the front of the field, and if you even look, it's over half that percentage of the field is in that top 10 positions. And then if you look at that shows you, highlights how little of an impact position differential has. Is that 21 and over, those guys starting 21st and back is only accounting for 16% of those top 10 DraftKings performances. So really, it shows you that focus is going to be on that front of the field right there. And a lot of that focus, obviously, on that front of the field is going to come from those dominator points. That's where the dominator points are scored from. That's where your fast cars qualify. Track position matters so much. Being on the pole is just lights out for scoring dominator points at this race.
Okay, so if we're starting early, we're looking for those dominators. Ryan, same thing for you. You have to agree here, or are we adding some bitterness, some debate here?
Yeah, we're focusing in on dominators and dominator points. So there's 312 laps, which is a lot of dominator points. It's I know for a lot of my builds, I in the past I've gone with 3 dominators. It's going to depend on what this race plays out like and kind of the situation that we're given. I know it's probably 2020, but I built a lineup with Keselowski, Chase Elliott, and Kevin Harvick, and all 3 dominated, right? That was the type of build I want to be. All of them had huge upside. They had elite speed. They can kind of get fast laps even if they never led. But then the upside was if they all led, they would separate themselves. And they all each led high chunks of that race. Last fall, it was pretty much just Logano and Blaney at the front. They were the 2 best cars. So in that instance, we wanted like a 2 dominator situation. But then Ross Chastain started in the back and finished at the front. He obviously, price-wise and situationally, was a pseudo 3rd dominator in a lot of aspects, even though his points weren't accumulated through leading. If you're grouping them into like a top tier driver, you needed 3 top tier drivers. And believe it or not, your best drivers are also the best drivers here at Phoenix. There seems to be a real correlation between your elite drivers and teams, and elite drivers are in the best teams, and then that whole package comes together for being the best play. So yeah, heavy on the front starters there. If you got someone that shows speed, I'll lean back towards Matt DiBenedetto, when he was driving the 95 car throughout the entire 2019 year, all these short flat tracks, which are kind of similar, that's hard to pass and rotation, all that was lined up for him. He was incredibly fast, and it didn't matter where he qualified per se, because he was going to run in that range because his car was quick enough. So even an oddity that stands out post qualifying in practice, if you feel like, oh man, that guy is not going to run top 15, top 10, they may, because that car is probably just that good at this track. And long run speed is not necessarily a huge deal if their car's quick, because there's no passing happening in a long green flag run. If they restart seventh, they're not going to fall too deep if their car is even halfway decent. So anyone that shows decent speed, qualifies top 10, usually always stays up there. And even if they're kind of oddities, you want that range. And the fact that it's over 50% coming from top 10 is kind of crazy. But no one's going to build that way. That's not what you would normally do at any other track. I mean, that's definitely kind of an oddity for this style of racing, this track in particular. And, that's definitely how I want to build my lineups as well.
So I just want to key in a little bit more on those dominator points. So just if you look at those last 8 Phoenix races, right, we had 25 performances of drivers scoring over 20 dominator points in those races. And of those, 19 performances came from guys starting inside the top 5. So that's going to show you where all your dominator points are coming from, those guys starting in the top 5. And even more so to that, the front row, right? The front row accounts for the pole sitter has scored 35 plus dominator points in 7 of the last 8 Phoenix races. And the second place starter has scored 35 plus dominator points in 5 of the last 8 races. So they've done it combined for 35 plus dominator points, both the first and second place starter 5 times in the last 8 Phoenix races. Most recently, obviously, your Penske duo, who started first and second last fall, Blaney and Logano. So it's very, very playable to play that first and second place guy.
Yep. And that literally goes back to the cars that rotate better are just better. You can't do a lot if you don't have that kind of speed built into the car. So it's really hard for drivers to overcome when someone else has better equipment here, or better setup, or better speed, or however you want to say it at this point, because the equipment's all the same. The better setup and better speed, it's hard to overcome that.
Well, would you guys play Cody Ware if he started on the pole?
If
he started on the pole, and if he got there with speed, yeah.
I mean, yeah. If he's fast in practice and he qualifies on the pole, sure. I mean, why wouldn't you?
There you go. All right. Well, let's get into some plays here. We're going to do as we do each and every week, where we talk about our favorite top tier play, mid-range play, and value play. To do so, I'm going to pull up some visual aids behind me while I do that. Feel free to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, show some love to everyone at Daily Fan Racing. Let's talk about some lineups. And of course, we're talking about players we can play in both DraftKings and FanDuel, but we got DraftKings here behind me. And I say we talk about it, starting with you, Ryan. Who is your high range target for this week?
So my top tier driver to watch, and I think we made a shift last week when you weren't here, is that this isn't necessarily an outright pick because we're too early in the week, but this is the driver heading into the weekend that we're probably most interested in this range. We want to see what they look like in practice, and we think there could be huge upside if all goes well. For me, this week it's Kyle Busch. So I'm not super high on Kyle Busch a lot this year. I think there's going to be a lot of weeks where I'm ready to fully fade him, and I'm ready to kind of stay away from him, and I think he'll bust. Last week was a week where I wasn't too necessarily high on him. But, when you look at Kyle Busch's history at this track, he has a third best average finish behind Harvick and Hamlin, and an unbelievable track record. 3 Cup wins, I think like 11 Xfinity wins, something crazy. And when you're taking downforce away and you're changing the way this car drives, and you're making him a little bit harder to drive. I think of Kyle Busch as being one of those guys that adapts better than anyone else. And I look at him as someone who can drive a car that's a little bit harder to drive. So I think he's a guy that can adapt really well if there is a little bit of difference in this car. And then this race last year, Tyler Reddick was one of the 3-4 best cars at the end. He was really strong. And, his performance in the final race wasn't very good, but let's face it, he was out of that team by that point in the year, right? that relationship was over. Reddick wasn't going to run good in the fall, so I'm not reading too much into that race. But I think Kyle Busch is a guy with a lot of track history here, and if the car's dialed in, that could win this race, be a dominator, and be a top play this week.
This was a track that I had circled on the schedule that I want to see what Kyle Busch is going to do, because like I feel like when you looked at RCR's performance on the short flat tracks last year, they were terrible outside of like a couple instances like the Clash where we saw him run well. Like I'm worried about going to Kyle this week, but yeah, so that's like he has the history here. I'm just worried about that team did not show very good speed on these tracks last year. So I mean, can't set it up. I mean,
that's part of the reason why he's a driver to watch too, is he may suck. They may not have the speed, right? Yeah. And you need to pay attention to that. So to me, a lot of these picks are drivers like we need to pay attention to, not just because they may be good, but sometimes it may be because they could be bad as well. But I think as a whole, Tyler Reddick's probably worst track type short flat tracks. At least that's how I feel historically. So to see him underperform doesn't necessarily surprise me. But even back to 2020 or 2021, the spring race, Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick had the fastest two cars. Now they blew tires because their setup was a little off, but they showed speed here in the past. And last year, like I said, Tyler Reddick towards the end of that race was looking really strong. You mentioned the Clash earlier this year. I think they have ways of figuring out speed. I think they're close. But if they're a little bit off, that close becomes 13th or 14th instead of 4th. So I'm just very interested in Kyle Busch as a whole throughout the whole year, or at least the beginning half here. I'm very curious. Because Auto Club's such an outlier overall. Right. I'm curious once we get into the bread and butter of the schedule if Kyle's going to be an elite player, if he's going to be in this kind of 8th to 12th range all year long. But Kyle, I got a lot of eye on him because I can see him kicking ass this week, and I can see him not being great either.
Well, that's why it's our driver to watch and not driver to target, as I was mistakenly saying earlier. Jason, we'll throw it over to you. Who is your top tier driver to watch this week?
Yeah, driver I'm watching, driver I'm targeting. It's hard not to target this guy when you come here at Phoenix is going to be Ryan Blaney. It doesn't matter what package we have, what type of car we have. Penske is good on short flat tracks, right? Ryan Blaney had the fastest car at this track at both races in Phoenix last year. He pretty much played defense for Logano in the championship race last year. He scored over 50 Dominator points in both races last year. He has the best average starting position at Phoenix over the last 8 races, the best average starting position on short flat tracks last year. So he's probably going to qualify up towards the front, which is going to make him a front runner to score those Dominator points. I love Ryan Blaney this week. I think he's going to be a great play. I don't know if he actually breaks through and gets that win. We know he likes to choke away those wins, but I think he's probably going to be up there for the front and lead a lot of laps.
Sounds whoa, excuse me. Sounds good to me. As we move forward to the mid-range, appreciate the love from Matthew here. If you guys want to pump it up for others to see, show some love to our by hitting the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, check out DailyFanRacing description down below.
I can't believe Matt's the only guy comment. Last week we had 15 different people in here chatting it up. Matt's the only guy in here. So if you're watching and you're not chatting, come on, say something. Say Gordo sucks, whatever. Try to figure out why he's having to clear his throat like this. But but yeah, I think I'm up now, right? Let me get into my value tier. Why you figure my mid tier play?
No, you're mid tier. This is why I'm the host.
I mean, he's basically a value tier. That's kind of why I want to,
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of value in that range.
There is a lot of value. So I went with Austin Cindric at 7,100 in the mid tier. At 7,100, it is almost a pure value. Like it's the greatest play of the week for me because it's just so cheap. I love it. And Josh Berry can be 8,000 for some reason. I guess because he runs good in Xfinity, but sure. Anyways, Austin Cindric.
He's got sim time this week, Ryan.
Oh, fuck me. Yeah, me too. I got iRacing in the background. So, Austin Cindric was 11th here last fall, and we saw the Penske dominance. Listen, there is definitely a difference between Joe Logano, Ryan Blaney, and Austin Cindric in speed right now. And that part of that's just down to experience. Cindric was a rookie last year. And he's not as good as the elite of the elite. That comes with experience, right? But he ran 11th here last year, and Penske as a whole were unbelievable. If they bring that speed back again, I expect Cindric to be competing for a top 10 finish. That's the first thing. As far as his history, I didn't truly calculate, but if it's not the track he has the most experience on, it's the second most experience on. Basically, through trucks, Xfinity, Cup, he's ran more laps here at this track than any other track in NASCAR. So a big edge for him is it's probably his most comfortable track. He has most lap time, and he's going to be more apt to be good here, right? And that shows in his results. His last 3 Xfinity results here was a win, and a second, which he was going to win until Hemrick moved him on the last lap in that final race in 2021. Cindric has been good here all the way back to basically his first starts. He was good here in trucks, even when he was struggling at the time. He's just really solid at this track. And if Penske has that speed, I expect him to be a guy that can really finish in the top 10 and really have a good score. And at only 7,100, where I think I'm going to have to be paying up to a couple of top tier drivers, I think this is a great price point to be at, because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get in that 8,500 to 7,500 range all that much. And I know, I don't think Jason or I really put him in our drivers to watch, but Kevin Harvick's sitting right in the middle there, and he's going to be super popular. And I'm going to play a ton of him. And outside of Harvick, I don't know how many players in that range I'm going to be able to get to if I'm playing some peak dominators in the 10K and above range. So I love that Cindric gives us this value at this price range, and I love his track history and the upside that he does give us.
Yeah, I love that point that you made about their salary and where people are going to fall with Harvick. But I love the call on Cindric there. Cindric is a guy who I had circled on my preseason preview about short flat tracks, and that that he could take that step forward this year and look for him too, because a lot of his finishes last year on these tracks came just outside that top 10, right? Second year in, makes that leap forward. All he's got to do is pick up about 4 to 5 positions in these races, and now he's competing for 7th and 6th place finishes. Very realistic inside this Penske car. So I love that. Another guy who I highlighted in my preseason preview as a guy to watch out for these short flat tracks, who I showed the love for him at the Clash, and he came through, is Ryan Preece, right? Ryan Preece is a guy who excels on these short flat tracks. We saw Stuart Haas racing be awesome on the short flat tracks last year. We saw Kevin Harvick pick up a win here. We saw Chase Briscoe win here at Phoenix last year, right? We saw even Cole Custer, if you look at his performances on short flat tracks last year, he ran in like that 13th to 16th range is where he ran out in his average position. I think Ryan Preece is a much better driver on these style tracks. We saw what he was capable to do at the Clash, where he was able to drive up front, lead some laps, put on a great performance. I expect big things out of him here at this value, 7,300 again. Hopefully a lot of people have a sour taste in their mouth with Preece over the last few weeks, and maybe can get some people off of him, but I love Ryan Preece this week.
Yeah, Preece is a good shout. I mean, this track type's going to suit him better than anything else out the gate, which is a good thing. And I struggle to think of where Stuart Haas was better at as a whole last year. Obviously, Briscoe won here, and I think he was top 5 in the season finale as well. Obviously, Harvick's great here. Harvick in the spring race showed top 5 speed a lot of that race, ran up towards the front. So, if Stuart Haas is going to be good, it's probably this style of track. At least that's kind of how I feel as of now. And this is a good opportunity for him that fits his driving style. So, very interested in him. And I think if, hearkening back to the graph that, Jason put up there, if Ryan Preece is the guy that qualifies like 15th, 16th, 17th, he's not going to see a lot of ownership. But those are the exact plays that just finished 12th, 13th, and 14th and are optimal because there's not a lot of place differential plays on these slates that really pay off. So I think Preece is a guy that maybe doesn't have top 10 upside, which he could, but maybe he's finishing.
Showed it at the Clash, he did, right? I mean, he definitely showed it at the Clash, right? I mean,
definitely showed it there.
Almirola has top 10 upside. Briscoe does. Yeah. Harvick does.
Yeah. They all have it. So we have to definitely factor in. But if we're maybe being more realistic or a little bit safer, let's say 13th from like an 18th starting position, scoring 35 points on DraftKings at 7,300, I think that's solid. And he's the guy that could maybe grab some fast laps too. But
what if he starts 8th or 9th? What do we do with him? I think I like him still then too.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get the ownership leverage, right? No one's playing him at 8th place starting position. So, and we know we've highlighted that drivers that start up front run up front. So
Right.
there's a reason they're starting up front. So yeah, you're not going to go too heavy, but to get overweight on him is not going to be hard. You only have to be probably 12 to 15% to be pretty overweight on that type of play.
All right, well, let's keep it rolling with the value tier. When we're talking about our drivers to watch, value is always important, especially when we're looking to get these higher end people this week at a race like this. So we're going to go right back to you, Ryan. Who is your value tier driver to watch this week?
So, and this is where it gets a little weird. Austin Cindric is my mid-tier play at 7,100. The driver price right underneath him at 6,900, Eric Almirola, is quote-unquote a value tier. We're categorizing that 7K as our barometer. That's our cutoff point. But Eric Almirola, I don't think anyone's surprised to know that he's good at short flat tracks. I think that's kind of his main. If he's good at anything, it's that and super speedway racing. But Almirola is just a good, solid driver. He's a guy that can give us a top 10. Kind of what Jason was saying. We definitely have Almirola as a top 10 upside guy. We got Priest as that probably as well. Briscoe, Stewart Haas as a whole ran good here for the most part last year. I know I wrote down some stuff here that will help me make this point, but Almirola has the 9th best average finish of drivers in this race. That excludes Chase Elliott because he's not in the race. 6 top 10s and 9 finishes of 13th or better in his last 11 starts here. So 9 of 11 inside the top 13 at this track. Last year, he had a bad finish that will kind of skew his immediate stats. That'll make people not think he's as great here probably. But 9 of 11 in the top 13 is a really big sample size and something I really like to look at. The other stat I really like is he's finished top 20 in 20 of his last 22 starts. So it's more for a consistency basis there, but a top 20 and 20 of 22 starts is a really strong number. That means he's not having bad days. Maybe he's running 17th or 18th, and maybe we can call that a bad day, but we're not seeing him run 29th, 28th, 27th, just absolute stinkers. And we're not seeing him crash out or doing anything stupid at this track. He's getting good solid finishes. And then his upside, 6 top 10s, shows that he has a really good upside. So I think it's 6 top 10s the last 11 races. So that's a really good 55% likelihood based off of that sample size that he's going to finish top 10. So really like Almirola. The price point I think is good as well. A little bit higher than I want. I thought about putting Corey LaJoie in the spot, because of that's a big salary savings there. And mainly because when I look down that range, pretty much underneath here, I'm worried about the upside for all these drivers. We talk about the best of the best run good here. Well, then guess who's not going to run here? The bad teams, the bad drivers. They're going to run poorly here. So I'm trying to find value plays that have that upside. Whereas like Stenhouse, I know he's probably going to suck. Gregson's probably going to struggle. These guys are going to be, they're not going to pay off. I want to play Zane Smith because it's so much fun. Most likely he's just going to run 28th all day.
You can't play him starting 20. You can't play him starting in the back. I mean, they're not going to pass them.
Exactly. They're not passing people. They're not big place differential movers. So that's where it gets kind of difficult on this track historically. Now, it's not saying that it's impossible for Zane Smith to start 29th and finish 20th.
What happens when we get green flag pit stops that first stage?
Dude, if they run the first stage and this track runs green a lot, they could be well down a lap. They could be trapped a lap down with 24 cars on the lead lap. Then we go back in stage 2 and they go down second lap and they're just never on the same lap to make up positions. Very, very common here. So it's difficult for those plays as much as I want to play the guys under 6K to get too excited about them. LaJoie consistently is running top 20. He'll qualify 19th. McDowell kind of fits this mold a bit as well, where maybe he'll start 18th, 19th, and he's a guy that can run top 20. So it's risky. Those are a lot riskier. These are guys I want to watch. I'm not picking them, but what people to watch who can maybe over deliver. Everyone else, except for who Jason's pick, and I'm purposely leaving him out so he can talk about him, are guys that I think are really risky that can just run 27th all day and just not be good. And I think that's more likely outcome. LaJoie and McDowell showed signs at times of being able to run top 20. Obviously McDowell, when he did the pit strategy at Gateway, led some laps and then ran all right. But it's hard to get too excited about anyone in this range. And that's why I really just went with Almirola, paid up for the salary at 6,900. And I hope that play works out.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with. You can't argue with Eric Almirola on a short flat track. I mean, we saw he won at New Hampshire 2 years ago, right? I mean, he can definitely show up, and I think he can even show up, and you never know, he can win at Phoenix. I actually bet him at plus 5,000, I think he was, or something to start this week. So that was actually, I was happy to get that number there for him. But as far as the guy who you left off there, the obvious place, but I do agree with you. It's hard when you go down here and start looking, as far as value, like it's going to be hard to find guys that are going to move forward from the back. Almost if you're going to go really cheap, you might as well just punt right to the cheapest guy, because how much points are you going to lose compared to that guy who starts 28th and runs 28th, right? But if you are looking for somebody with that upside, it's hard to not like AJ Allmendinger here at his price tag. I think he's going to present a good value. If we look at, AJ Allmendinger is great at those road courses, and I think the short flat tracks, the flatter tracks really play into that. And if you see throughout his career, he's had some success on the short flat tracks. Even last year, they made a point to get him starts on the short flat tracks in this car. He had 6 races on this track type, and he had 5 top 20s in those races, which include a 10th place at Gateway and a 12th here at Phoenix. Phoenix is one of his better oval tracks. Earlier in his career, he had a 10-race stretch where he finished 18th or better in 9 out of 10 races. 3 of those were inside the top 11. He also had 3 front row starts in that same period. So, I mean, he knows how to get around this track. We see the speed that colleague shows up with. He's a consistent driver, veteran driver. I mean, at this price tag, especially if he qualifies, where he typically qualifies 21st, 20th, close enough to where he's not going to fall out down, can hold on to that lead lap, grind out a top 10 finish.
Okay. Yeah. I like all that stuff you guys have put out there so far. A couple things to add on to it. Coop saying that Priest isn't going to start top 10. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. Still a guy we're going to look out for. And that's something that we're going to take note of as we are going forward. But that does it for our DraftKings plays. This is the part where I get greedy and I talk about the stuff I want to talk about. This is your chance to make that bold claim. Who is your race winner? Put your foot down. We can clip this after they win and we can post it everywhere. Who are your race winners, Ryan? We'll start with you.
So my race winner is actually Jason's driver to watch, and that's Ryan Blaney. So like I mentioned earlier, I don't think there's going to be a huge impact overall from the rule changes. I think for the most part, the teams that made good grip last year and had the setup nailed in Penske are going to be just as good this time around. So I'm really liking what we saw from Blaney last fall. Obviously, he was better than Logano. I mean, if we look at that race realistically, Blaney was faster pretty much throughout that entire race, but passing is really difficult, and he wasn't going to force it on his teammate who's running for a championship. And then I always like a narrative. I love a narrative, and Ryan Blaney's the center of attention right now. Kyle Petty called him out, and what Kyle Petty said, it was true. It's 100% true. And people don't have to like it. They don't have to like that Kyle Petty wasn't as good as Ryan Blaney. What the hell? I don't understand that point. Like, you can't comment on someone because your race win total isn't the same. Ryan Blaney has underperformed. He's been in Penske elite equipment for years and years. He went winless last year. He is underperforming. That's the truth, right? But just like last year, when we started the year, we went through the first 8 races, 9 races, 10 races, and everyone was saying, why isn't Chase Elliott winning? Why isn't Chase Elliott winning? And then he went and won like 4 of the next 10 races. Sometimes you just have to relax on a narrative. Sometimes you just have to wait and be patient, and the talking points can be just that. They're talking points. And in reality, Ryan Blaney gets to go to a track where his team's great at. Historically, Penske is phenomenal here, all the way back Keselowski, decades long, right? And so I can see them having the fastest car again. Blaney's obviously really, really good here. I think he's a guy to go out and win this race. And these tend to happen when there's a narrative. These drivers tend to put up races, and I don't know if it's coincidental or if it's truly that they just take that extra step because they're pissed off. But I think Blaney's a guy that could show up and win this race. And it lines up perfectly because of everything, we stated with that team and that driver in particular at this track.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say there about Ryan Blaney. Like, he's going to show up. He's going to have a fast car. He's going to lead a lot of laps. He's going to be at the front. But ultimately, I think at the end, he's going to choke it away. He's going to choke it away. And the closer is going to close one final time at Phoenix before his career is over. I'm going with Kevin Harvick as the winner. He proved in 2022 he's still is elite on the short flat tracks. He won at Richmond, had 4 top 5s in comparable tracks. This is by far, obviously, his best track. That's no secret, right? 9 wins here, more than he has on any other track in the series. He's going for his 20th straight top 10 at Phoenix. Hasn't won here in 9 races. He is due. Final year, I think he gets one last win here at Phoenix, rides off, and I'm sure he'll be vacationing before the championship race. So
there we go.
I dig it.
All right, well, that's a bunch of stuff we've thrown at you guys in 40 minutes time as of right now. There we go, 40 minutes down. We talked about our drivers to watch, our predicted our race winners, as well as just the overall projection of how we think this race is going to go, and it is definitely a fun one. That is not it for content, though, guys. We have a bunch of stuff out throughout the week. Make sure to check out Daily Fan Racing, which is all linked down below with Ryan, as well as all of Jason's stuff down below as well. But please, floor is yours. Tell me your final thoughts there and where they can find you guys. Ryan?
Sorry, yeah, I was zoned out. Hopefully by tomorrow, the root canal side of things is less effective, and I'm a little more zoned in. I'm definitely I'm exhausted at this point. I'm ready for some sleep. But this week we got Xfinity and Cup action, so everything's gonna be over at DailyFanRacing.com. We're gonna have full content. I'm gonna do an Xfinity podcast this week. Not something we normally do, but we got qualifying a day early, which is wonderful. It's not same day, so gonna do a little bit extra content, and that also helps that there's only 2 races this week, so I'm gonna use that time and do a little bit more there. We do have a promo going on. I probably should have said this in the beginning, probably could have led with this, but Dustin, who does a bunch of content for us over at Daily Fan Racing, his birthday was yesterday, and he messaged me. He's like, hey, can we do a promo for my birthday, give like 31% off? And he was like, I'll pay for the difference. I was like, I don't care about the difference. Yeah, sure. We'll celebrate your birthday. So if you sign up now and use Dustin31 promo code, you get 31% off your first month. So take advantage of that. Come join us, hang out. Got a bunch of content that's going to come out this week, and we have everything covered. Everything you need to be successful, we have. So come join us.
There we go. Be sure to take advantage of that. Ryan, thank you for joining us. Despite your root canal, for all your recovery, we are definitely rooting for you. Jason, what about you? Where can I find you, and what are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, ready for the big weekend. Ready to watch some practice on Friday. So I make sure you're following me on Twitter. Checking my free article out every Sunday at runpuresports.com. You can find out to see if any of my ideas have changed since after practice. If I've changed my philosophy and what my approach is going to be, I'll give all the important stats you need, cheat sheet, cores, all that good stuff. Looking for Xfinity content, obviously head over to Run Pure Sports. Check out Reed Cooper. He's got some stuff over there. Speaking of Coop, we will be having a live show Sunday at 1:30, breaking down the whole slate as well over at Run Pure Sports YouTube channel. So check us out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to grab some of those Run Pure cores and put them in my stuff, man. Sorry, Gordo, you won't get that.
No, you're good, man. Well, that's going to do it for us here on the Daily Fan Racing YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, not only live, but after the fact as well. Either way, make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, show some love to my 2 incredible co-hosts here, and best of luck in all your racing endeavors this weekend, guys. Let's make some money.